What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of TOJ Talks presented by Badlands. I'm your host, Will Parkinson, at Will11 on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Joined by as familiar of a face as you're going to get on Badlands, Connor Rogers. Me and Connor are freshly back from Mobile. Connor, how we doing today?
Good, man. You and I were joking that we are not well rested at all. Our lovely, and I truly mean it, significant others did not respect the grind. We were up and at it today, and it is what it is. It's fun. We had a long week. It was a good week. I'm excited to get into it a little bit more on the feed. So, yeah, a lot going on down in Mobile, Alabama, as it is every year.
Yeah, Mobile's has got a special place in everyone's heart. I am incredibly sunburned somehow. Only the left side of my face though. It's incredible how that works.
Just this part of my neck is a totally different color.
It's horrible. Amidst all that drama, obviously nothing important happened this week. No, but I don't want to. We can touch on it right at the end of just kind of that article. I know you and Joe did a pretty good job of recapping it on Tuesday night's episode. I want to start with the Senior Bowl, and I want to finish on tackle because we had a couple of things we were talking about beforehand. Pass catchers was a big kind of theme of obviously the Jets, coming into this draft. It's O-line, pass catchers feels like the two biggest needs. It feels like the two most glaring needs. The good thing is, it feels like in Mobile and in this draft overall, this is a great draft to need offensive linemen and pass catchers. What were your impressions of, especially the receivers down in Mobile and who maybe stood out to you?
Yeah, I mean, this was a group that they had a lot to gain here at the Senior Bowl, and I think that there was some big names. A lot of college football fans obviously know, Lad McConkey because he's played in so many big games for Georgia. I think to a different extent, Devontae Walker from UNC partially because he played with Drake May, and the other partially that he had a weird eligibility issue with the NCAA that wasn't character related at all. They kind of screwed the kid. And then when he came back for about 6 weeks, he was phenomenal. So a lot of people were looking forward to seeing him. Brendan Rice, I mean, he's Jerry Rice's son. He played for a high-profile program like USC. Jerry was literally on the field the last day there. So there was a lot of different players. I think for me, Jamari Thrash from Louisville is somebody that, it could be a reconfirmation bias because I liked him coming into the event. I think I had him as my 15th ranked wide receiver, but still in the top 100 players for me. He's got speed. I really like his routes. His route breaks are very sharp. And Will, I mean, we were talking about this. He caught the ball. Like a lot of these guys got down there, and I give them the benefit of the doubt because if they caught the ball on tape and didn't catch the ball at a few practices, it could be they've never worked with these quarterbacks. It could be timing. It could, people will laugh at this. It could genuinely be the footballs in the practice field. I mean, it could be the condition of the footballs in the practice field. And what I mean by that is you never know if they're broken in. There could be all kinds of crazy stuff. So, but Thrash, he wins down the field. He catches the ball. He's really good with the ball in his hands and short area targets. And he doesn't cost you a lot. I think that's kind of our conversation here with the Jets is you could sit here and have these conversations. To me, a guy like Lad McConkey or Ricky Pearsall, who was freaking awesome, the Florida wide receiver. Those guys are round 2, round 3 guys to me. I don't know if the Jets don't have round 2 capital, but even when they're picking in round 3, do they even make it there or can they afford to take them there? Everybody knows Roman Wilson dominated down there. He won a national title, so he's not really the sleeper he once was a couple of months ago. He can make the spectacular catch. He separates really well. This was a good but not spectacular group of wide receivers in Mobile.
I couldn't agree more. I think there was a couple guys that stood out that I was expecting to stand out, and there was a couple guys that I felt like, look, a guy like Ja'Quan Jackson from Tulane.
Yes.
I felt like again, this, to be clear, anyone that's not been down to Mobile or watched it, if you're a slot receiver, this is your heaven. Like you go, you're not going to get hit. For the most part, you kind of have free reign. Everything's one-on-ones, and you can just use the middle of the field.
The releases about.
Yeah, it's hysterical. And some of these guys take 8-9 seconds in their breaks. Not their fault. I would do the same thing if I was them, purely because I don't have a choice. But now he was somebody that stood out, for sure to me. Just have caught the ball and ran good routes. Lad McConkey was fantastic. The only thing I was expect from him that I wanted to see was we've seen all of it on tape. Size-wise, like. When you're at Georgia and you're the kind of smaller dude on a team full of gigantic human beings, could you hold up in a different environment where you're not surrounded by a Georgia roster that's still the best roster probably in college football, even though Michigan won, regardless? He looked awesome, right? So like you mentioned those guys. Brendan Rice was a guy, as you mentioned, again, probably these are all day 2 guys that unless the Jets trade back or, get aggressive, it doesn't feel like a realistic targets just for different reasons. Brendan Rice, really good at the catch point, strong hands, all that stuff. Talked a lot of shit. Was awesome.
Yeah, it's fun to
But
watch.
that said, like he's not like an explosive athlete, and the Jets have leaned towards more of these like twitchier, guys that are maybe high RAS score type receivers. That has been their profile, at least under Joe Douglas. So he doesn't really strike me as a guy that, even if the Jets were, looking at him, Ricky Pearsall is a guy you mentioned as well. There was a lot of drops. I think I noticed that with the tight end. I think you and Trevor mentioned this on Stock Exchange. A lot of drops. The receivers, the tight ends. It got like to a point on day 2, practice 1, where I turned to Mike Giardi, friend of the pod, and I go, what are we doing here? Like, like
somebody
it was a little
texted me
frustrating.
that exact line during one of the drops. They were like, what is this?
Yeah, Jamari Thrash, as you mentioned, was another name. I thought Johnny Wilson's the most intriguing player for me there, purely because, like, again, I understand he's probably a tight end at some point, or he's just a huge slot. Like, I don't know how you can really play outside just because it takes him a little second to get going. But I will tell you, I don't know about his ball skills. Those were a little questionable at best, I will say.
Yeah.
Alan Lazard-esque. But when he breaks off and gets a release, I was like, oh my God, this dude's flying. And he's legitimately 6'7". He's the biggest. He was literally the tallest guy there. Again, I don't know where he gets drafted. I don't even know if he's like, I don't even know what to make of him. I just could not get over the fact that he's 6'7", playing receiver and like moves really well for being that high.
He looks like a basketball player.
Like, yeah, he looks like he doesn't
exaggerate that, but he really does look like a basketball player.
He legitimately looks like he could play the 3 in the NBA.
Yeah,
and like
100%.
Again, he's a guy. I'm sure if someone's going to say put on 30 pounds and play tight end, and that's just what happens to these guys, unfortunately.
Right.
Obviously, running back's a spot where running back's really tough in the Senior Bowl. It's tough to evaluate the All-Star game process and pretty much anything. Post college football season, even the bowl games, it's hard to evaluate some of these guys. Shout out Frank Gore Jr. winning the Shrine Bowl MVP. I was really impressed with Marshawn Lloyd, USC, stuff aside. He's just like your classic running back too in the NFL, picks up tough yards, really good, after contact and stuff like that. He's never going to break a huge run. Even the big time Colorado run from early in the year that I'm sure everybody saw because they were tuned in that game. He almost got hawked like immediately. I was like, oh, this is Marshawn Lloyd to a T. Did any of the running backs kind of stand out to you? It's a tough event, and the Jets have gone running back every year. So maybe they go running back again on day 3, but probably should just sign a veteran and get it over with.
Right. And it feels like that route does make sense if you believe in Izzy Abanikana's development, because then you allow Izzy to come into the year as the 3. You have a vet as the 2 that you legitimately can play if Brees gets hurt, and he's also going to play the other reps when he needs to, change. And then you're protected. If Izzy develops, you elevate his role. If he doesn't, you keep him in that 3rd running back role. But you still got to do the work because, there's a world where the Jets could draft one of these guys. And for me, day 2 and 3, and I usually don't do this.
This is a bad class of running backs overall.
It's very uninspiring. There's no guy that I think goes in the top 50. Day 2 and 3 of practices, I stood literally 3 feet from them doing footwork just because there's really not much you can get from the running backs at the Senior Bowl, in my opinion. You could watch them catch the ball, which is important. We were joking. You can usually watch them pass protect, which is very important. That wasn't cranked up to the notch it usually is. Remember Dameon Pierce at the Senior Bowl?
It was the coolest part of my 100. First Senior Bowl. He just lit. I don't know who he lit up, but it was like, I was like, whoa. This dude is awesome.
Stuffed somebody, I forget. It was somebody.
It wasn't Jermaine. It wasn't Jermaine. But
Jermaine crushed somebody else. Yeah, and then we didn't see a lot of that. So you just want to see how they move and how they're built. Ray Davis from Kentucky. He's 220 pounds. I think he's 5'8". So imagine what that build looks like. It's muscle. He's not chubby.
Oh, he's thick with 3 C's.
It's really like fit Mike Tolbert almost. But he catches everything, one-handed, two-handed, very comfortable, makes adjustments. His legs are so thick that you understand why he forced over 100 missed tackles the last 2 years. He was the guy I liked the most. I just think he's a steady Eddie at the position. He can catch the ball. He can run between the tackles. He did everything the right way. The coach was, I forget his name, and I feel bad about that. He was an Arizona staffer, the Cardinals staffer. He was really working with the guys and having to correct this group on a lot of different things. And he was more of a player's coach. He was being very optimistic with them. But Ray was the only guy that after every rep, he's just like, this dude he just nailed it every single time. So that's the only guy for me out of the running backs that I walked away and felt differently about going into this event.
Yeah, there was a couple of guys. There's a couple other guys just to mention there. Cody Schrader at a Missouri was a guy that I I watched every time he did anything all week because I was like, I feel like this dude's better than I think he is. And I left going, I have no idea if he's good or not. Like, I don't know if he's bad. I don't know if he's good.
Really hard.
He tries really hard. He's built definitely built like a dude who can withstand contact, but it's just like not wiggly at all. And I was like, all right, like, what's your ceiling? What can you realistically offer that somebody else in the NFL couldn't? I don't know how to pronounce the kid out of New Hampshire's last name. Full transparency. Yeah. I'm not going to try.
Is it Lave?
It's Lob, whatever it is. I don't know I don't know if that dude is ever going to play like legit running back in the NFL. He will make a team because he was one or two on like 20 plus mile an hour. We talk about Brees's GPS stuff all the time. He was 1 or 2 all 3 days, and he caught every single pass. Like, he was torching people in one-on-ones. And again, small dude, compact. I know he had the big game in New Hampshire where he like 300 plus yards receiving. Like, very Danny Woodhead-esque vibes of like, not because he's a white running back in small school, but like a little bit. And the fact that he was just like super athletic pass catcher. I don't know what his role is in the NFL. Again, he's probably like a running back 3 that attaches a special teams guy, but he was at least caught my eye of like, oh, that dude's really athletic. Like, that's all I could really get from him.
Well, that's what you want from guys like that are going for 300 yards a game or whatever it is at times at that level of competition, because you're like, okay, you're clearly too good for this level of football, but will that mean anything when you go up against, powerhouse players? And I agree with you. I think the fact that he's going to test really well gives him a legitimate shot to stick on a roster.
I want to move towards the offensive line, and we'll kind of work interior to kind of the tackles, which is obviously the big talking point. The Jets are in a weird spot. Again, I've talked about this a million times. I know you have as well. They have two and a half solidified guys that we think will be starters next year. I think there's not really a choice of Lakin. I mean, I guess you could theoretically see him cut. That's the number one thing. But like, Timmon and AVT will be starters. Where they start is a huge question.
Yep.
I've been a pretty big advocate this offseason of Timmon at right guard, AVT right tackle, sign or draft the center, more likely sign and have a veteran guy deal with Rodgers. Let Timmon just play football, not have to deal with all this different stuff. Tomlinson left guard, you draft a left tackle. That's like, in my opinion, could be, a good strategy. Again, I know it's not a popular one. Everyone thinks Tittman's Mawai and all that stuff. Jackson Powers-Johnson will not be there when the Jets are picking. I just do want to talk about him for a second because he's another guy similar to Joe Tittman in a lot of senses of huge for a center. Like, you just don't see 330-pound centers. And he was every bit worth the hype. And I was like, this guy, if he gets out of round 1, it's only because he's a center. Like, there's no other reason for him to get out of round 1.
He's amazing. To carry that much weight at the center position and still be able to move the way centers are asked to is, and obviously he could play guard as well. So that's a big bonus. This would have happened any year. It's not just this year, but you do become frustrated they don't have a second rounder this year, because I like the depth of the offensive line. And it does make you wonder, because of players like Jackson Powers-Johnson, and we're going to get into a lot more here. Do you find a way to use a 2025 pick to move up into the second round some way and still maybe keep your third? So say you put together a 4th and a future 2 for a 2 this year. Is there a rebuilding team that just knows they're going to suck this year and they need as many draft assets as they can for the future that's willing to do that? I'm not guaranteeing they are, but you got to get creative, because the depth of this offensive line class is really good. And guys like that are second round players that are starters. They're starters, and they're higher end starters. They anchor really well. I mean, he's a guy that anchors really well. We've seen him move really well in that offense. I personally, from scouting, always fall in love with either really big centers or really undersized centers that
the athletic guy that moves.
Exactly. It's the in-between that usually you're like, okay, when you're a jack of all trades, and it also depends what offense you want to be, right? Like, you look at some of the small centers that have come out over the year, they can't fit in every offense because they can't handle the power that's going to be asked of them. But when you look at Powers-Johnson, I mean, that's a guy where you look at Frank Ragnow coming out a few years ago that went in the first round, massive center. And you look at how the Lions play football. I mean, they could just literally punch you in the face with the way they can run the ball downhill. And a lot of that is because of Ragnow. So that's I'm not saying that's the comparison. I'll get there eventually. But when you look at what a big center can do from a competitive advantage, or even if you play him at guard, it totally changes the dynamic of your offensive line.
Yeah, I'm on the same page as you. I wanted to quickly hit on Christian Haynes. He's another guy that
Oh man.
I comped him this morning, and actually, this is one you talked for about 1,000 hours the last 4 days. The one thing I thought of this morning, very again, I mean, he's not Zion Johnson in terms of where he came in at pre-draft, in terms of the pre-draft Senior Bowl process, but I felt like Zion came in, was just so good for 3 straight days, consistent, didn't lose reps, played center, played guard. Everyone kind of like cool demeanor and let everyone else get flustered rushing him. I felt like it was such a similar, you know, experience watching Haynes. We talked about it a little bit. I was like, I knew he was good. I knew he was going to be solid, and he could. I just want to see different level of competition in a program where, you know, you're not the best. You're not like maybe the most well-known guy. Could you still stand out? And we'll get to Tyler Guyton in a minute. But the two of them working together, A, was impressive, and B, I felt like Haynes, like it wasn't just him getting his hands on you. He just didn't ever feel like he was out of position at all, and he gave maybe a yard and then just stick people. He's probably a top 60 pick right at this point, so I don't know that he gets there.
Yeah, he could be.
But if he, I don't know, that Zion Johnson to me thing where it's just like comes in, versatile dude, and just like steady, didn't lose a rep. And you're like, oh, this guy will walk in day one and probably start.
I agree with you. Zion's a good callback. Quinn Miners is a good callback. And Quinn was maybe almost too unique because he came from Wisconsin Whitewater after the pandemic season where he was like lifting logs in his backyard.
No teeth.
Yeah. And the big belly, like on purpose. Yeah. But why it is similar, UConn still is a smaller football program in terms of the product they've put out. And Haynes has a weird body where you look at him, and this is just how scouting works for a lot of these guys that work for teams.
Doesn't wow you.
No, I mean he's got like a boxier body with a little bit of a belly, and his torque, his hands, his strength, his demeanor, his fire. You're right. It feels like if you had to pick any guy that had the most consistent week, he never looked bad. It was him. I mean, that's counting Guyton, Fuaga, like
did you hear what he said when he got his helmet ripped off?
Yeah, he said
he
literally 2 feet away.
He said you need church or whatever.
Yeah, and he said if something like if you're not built for it, go to church.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, you got a little side to you. Well, I like this.
What I loved about him was he whooped that dude's ass, and it was the LSU. I think it was the LSU.
Yeah, it was LSU defense.
Yeah. Okay, so that was probably Jordan Jefferson, and Jefferson was pissed about it that he played through the whistle. Okay. He took it a little too far. He ripped Haynes' helmet off and he threw it. It actually was pretty dangerous because
Myles Garrett-esque.
You had players and then media and a lot of camera shooters standing right there, and he launched this thing. And Haynes didn't react, knowing like, hey, if I reacted in a game situation, there's refs on the field, it's a penalty. Walked over, grabbed his helmet, and then ran his mouth. Because number one, he already kicked his ass on the rep, so who cares? You don't need to punch him in the face. Hey, he's, man, I agree. There's a chance he goes in the second round now where legitimately, I was, talking to a scout during his drills, and we were just talking about him, how underestimated he kind of became, because you look at him and you're like, you look at his program, you watch the tape. I really like the tape, but he was my favorite, 5th round offensive lineman. And you look at that week he had, it's like, there's just no way. There's no way a guy like that should ever go in the 5th round. So I would say 3rd to 4th for him. And another guy that I think is legitimately an 8-year starter at guard. Yeah,
that's a guy that, like, if you want to say Tippmann's your center, and, like, he's there in the 3rd round, whether you've gone tackle or not already, and you've gone, like, whether you have addressed receiver already or not, like, at that point, that's
the guy.
That's the guy, and you're like, okay, cool. My right side's AVT, Tippmann, and Haynes. My left side's Tomlinson and Olu, and you're like, now we have a top 10 to 12 offensive line if everybody's healthy.
Hey, if you sign like a Robert Hunt or a Cushenberry and can get out of Lakin's money,
now you're
living the dream.
Yeah, get everyone excited on that one. Yeah. I want to hit on some of these tackles. I'm going to start with Tyler Guyton because him and Haynes worked so well together.
Yeah, they did.
My 2 things with Guyton that I was impressed with, and there's one couple things I was like, this is why you're not one of the top 2 tackles at the moment. I thought his anger and the way he looks for contact, like every single rep was the loudest pad popping you heard all week. No matter who he went against, no matter what side he was on, one-on-ones, team drills, I was like, this dude loves to hit people, which is awesome. The Jets need more of that. You need that toughness, that side. he's built in a lab. I've heard you use that before. It's true. The dude is massive. And like, I saw him run some routes. They were doing one-on-ones, messing around, yesterday, which is annoying because we're down there and I'd like to see them actually do something meaningful. But again, it's fun to watch some of these linemen run around and run routes. But he like legitimately is a good athlete. My two things with him and he does a really good job of like re-anchoring once if he gets beat, he's done much better. He looked like he started to get better as the week went on of like getting his hands back inside. I will say the two things that stood out to me that were a little like he needs to work on, very wide hands. And we'll get to Fuaga obviously in a second. I saw some of that as well. Like dudes, and if you're not watching, you can't see, but like dudes out here, like way too much.
Yeah, lets people into his chest.
Yeah, lets people into his chest. And it's like, as strong as you are, there's somebody always stronger in the NFL. The other thing that was
Chris Jones.
The other thing that's I guess not concerning, but with many of these guys is he a true? Can he play left tackle? Like, is he just going to be a right tackle? Which is fine. We've seen Rashawn Slater and these guys like maybe he's just a right tackle, and that's fine. But he had some reps at left tackle yesterday, and I went, you look better at right tackle. You look better at right tackle. I guess what's kind of your thoughts on Guyton? Because I know he's a guy you highlighted before, and obviously he had a good week as well.
He needs seasoning, and it's the dangerous case of, so we did O-line before the Senior Bowl, and I had him as offensive tackle 6, ahead of J.C. Latham and Patrick Paul, but behind Alt, Fashanu, Fuaga, Mims, and Jordan Morgan. And after this week, I would have Guyton over Morgan. It's not that I don't like Morgan. I really think he just might be a guard, and I was kind of in the middle on that for a while. We'll see. But Guyton is a prototype of the position. The long arms, the length, the size, clean weight. He has incredible practice energy with his teammates. He loves bringing the fight. I've been to a lot of Senior Bowls, as you know, Will, and I've watched a lot of offensive linemen. I don't know if this is how they felt, but it's how they looked. They were just there because they had to be there, and they're good enough that it didn't matter. But Guyton, he really loved the opportunity to just go after it. And I think you're right. It almost hurts him at times when he wants to bring the fight, because when you want to bring the fight, your hands and feet can get a little sloppy, and that's the case. He's going in the first round. I mean, he's just so physically gifted, and he's a context guy. He's at TCU. They use him at H-back sometimes. That's the kind of athlete he is. He transfers to Oklahoma. He's a 1-year starter at right tackle. I think he didn't even have 300 pass blocking snaps. Like, he's barely taken pass sets. So when you watch him go do it at Mobile against some of the best in the draft, I expect the bad reps, and there was some, but there was a lot of good. So now what I'll say is, because we are always Jet-centric here, that's a guy that it's almost, you're set up to fail if you just throw him out there and say, hey, you're on an island and you got to protect 40-year-old Aaron Rodgers. He needs to go somewhere where, 1, the offensive line coaching is really good. 2, you could play him. I don't think you have to sit him like the Steelers did with Broderick Jones, although that'd be nice. But you probably want to, at times, give him a little help on the right side. I'm not moving him to the left right away. I don't like that at all. You're right. The few reps at left tackle, it's like he hasn't done it.
It looked like a guy that like literally just like his feet were just like, I don't know what to do here.
They weren't in sync. And they're not always in sync on the right side, but he's had enough muscle memory on the right side that it's better more often than not. So I like him a lot. I think he's going to go in the... Man, if Anton Harrison, his former teammate, went in the 20s last year.
I was literally just going to bring him up and be like, we're going to have the same thing.
I think he goes a little earlier. I think he goes top 23-ish in this draft. And I think that what probably surprised teams the most is just how much he wants to get even better, considering he hasn't played a lot. So Guyton is on the Jets' radar if they trade out because he's just so talented. But it's kind of a shame that he doesn't really fit their timeline right now. They need somebody that can truly play right now. And I think I'll be very high on him in this draft. He'll be very high on my rankings. And I don't want to hear anybody comment on him in a negative way after 1 year, because that's just not what you're drafting. You're not drafting a 1-year prospect.
I want to just hit on a couple of things here before we wrap. Let's hit on Fuaga.
Yeah, you have to, right?
Yeah, I mean, I want to at least say this. It makes people have to, subscribe and have to get to the 24-minute mark. My couple of impressions, he had a good week. I'm just going to leave it. I'm going to phrase that.
Good is the right word.
He had a good week. I will say, and this is fair or not, the last couple of years, we've seen the guys that have gone in the top 10 or 12 or been like the shoe-in first-round guys that come and actually participate, because we see it a lot. We already saw it, the Byron Murphys and Fontenot's and stuff pull out, obviously, right before. He didn't say, I did not go, he's the best player on the field.
Mm-hmm.
And for me to think I'm going to draft this guy at 10, I was looking for like, I'm effing here. I'm going to dominate these next 3 days because I can. He looked good. I do think he's a tackle. I don't think he's just a guard. He's got crazy strength in his upper body. He's very physical. When he gets his hands on you, you're done. The feet are not great, and we're just going to transition to, after we talk about Fuaga, I want to quickly hit on this before we wrap. The feet aren't like special, and that's why I have questions about if he's really just, he's probably just a right tackle. And again, that's fine. I don't know. He was good. I wasn't like blown away though, and I was kind of hoping to be blown away knowing some people have him over Fashanu, which
it's rich for my blood.
It's rich. It's a little rich for me. I think he's closer to OT4 than he is to OT2.
Right. You see why he came out of nowhere this year for a lot of people on boards. I mean, nobody really knew who he was in September. So that goes to show you the kind of year he had and how he's grown as a pass protector. And he was voted by his teammates on the defensive line and linebackers, the guys he had to block throughout the week, as the practice player of the week, for the offensive lineman. That says a lot about what the guys thought about going against Fuaga. He weighing in at 330, 332.
Yeah, it's big, yeah.
I mean, that's an amazing weight for his size because he's very tall. He has a very good offensive lineman body that he clearly takes care of and works really hard. And that was very impressive to me how he came into the week. Just he's been working his ass off. That's what I'll say. Because a lot of people thought he'd be closer to 345, 340. And I mean, an offensive line body that's 6'6", 6'7", that's 330 of lean weight.
He did the opposite of Tavondre Sweat. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, who did not weigh in at all. So that's a choice. Here's what Fuaga. I agree with you. Like, it's the feet and pass pro. They're not always in sync with his upper body. He's so strong with his upper body that he probably thinks, that he could just be a brawler. And that is kind of how a lot of power guards operate, not tackles. He, I think, had some really incredible displays of strength. And I think there was also times where he leaned on that strength when his feet were behind, where it would probably get called a penalty at the next level. Like that final shove or under the shoulder pad and hook and drop, where like that's the kind of stuff he's going to have to be careful with. So, yeah, I thought Fuaga had a good week, not a great week. Like, I didn't think he was as good as DeJuan Jones was last year.
No,
right? That's
DeJuan Jones, you left and you're like, oh.
He should go in the top 40 after we thought he was a top maybe 100 guy.
Yeah.
And he thought he had such a good day or two that he left.
He's like, I'm out, man.
And then he went in the fourth round because a lot of people had concerns about that. I think every coach and scout loves Fuaga. Like the person, he's just going to work. And it's easy to see that because look at 2022 to 2023. He was good in 2022. He was great in 2023.
Yeah, it's like, okay, he was great. Now another year, he's going to get even better.
Yep. You and I noticed on day 3 of practice, he had his helmet off almost the whole time. I don't know if he rolled or tweaked something on that turf, but he clearly got a little banged up too.
Yeah,
so
did not do much.
He didn't do much, but he was out there, and a lot of guys don't even go out there when they don't do much. So, yeah, I like him. If you're a Jets fan, you're hoping that Alt or Fashanu make it to 10 because they're just bona fide blue chip prospects. And I think Fuaga's a good to very good prospect. He's not a blue chip prospect to me, where I really think Fashanu and Alt are. So, and then it goes back, we're going to have this conversation now. I think that, we were discussing our fear that's been ingrained of that Joe Douglas has really never drafted a tackle with good feet. And it's very odd. The one offensive lineman they drafted with great feet, Elijah Vera Tucker, they refused to play a tackle for so long. And it's a bizarre evaluation process to me. And it's come out to bite them. Becton doesn't move well laterally, and he gets beat with outside speed literally 45 times. It feels like this year was the pinnacle of it. But you look at Mitchell, Carter Warren, these guys, there's nothing wrong with those two because they're 4th round swing tackle projections. But the problem with them is often how light or lack of the lightness in their feet, where Fuaga, if you have one concern, it's that he's not always too light on his feet to mirror, especially against inside moves that are counters from speed. So And that's why when you hear the rumors, I know Rich Cimini's been on this, that Joe Douglas has an affinity for Fuaga. It's like,
You're not
that's
shocked.
his type. That is his type to a T. But maybe the Jets need to kind of change, so they don't always have the same exact guy across the offensive line, because then you're very one-dimensional. And I think that's something in their evaluation process is that it's I get falling in love with the brawlers, and I'm in love with Fuaga. Like, don't get me wrong. I think he's awesome. But I'm not building the Jets. I'm building a big board for everyone following the draft. The Jets, I think, need maybe more of an athletic, I don't want to say finesse tackle, because that's a kind of a weird word for an offensive lineman, but they need somebody that can really mirror on an island. They have not had that guy since Brick.
No. Yeah, look, we were talking about this, and you mentioned it there. It's just a lot of upper body guys. And that works if you have one of them or two of them on your offensive line, when your whole offensive line pretty much is all upper body bench press guys that like get their hands on you and they don't let go. That's great. But we've seen too many times, and it happens every time. It's like, oh, wow, the Jets do really well against, later career Khalil Mack, or really well against Joey Bosa and these guys. It's like, yeah, because they're all power. So it's like, great. They're not all power, but I mean, they obviously have finesse to their game as well. But generally speaking, those edge rushers, even Myles Garrett, who's obviously a freak, like uses so much power. So the Jets actually don't do horribly with those guys. The Micah Parsons of the world, the Jalen Phillips, and these different guys that are just like, I'm going to try to blow by you. That's why they can never, they couldn't block Carl Lawson and Bryce and these guys during practice, is because they get beat. Their first step's not quick enough. They don't have light feet. And then they get a lot of holding penalties because someone flies by you and you hook them and it's over. And that's why the Fashanu conversation, talking to a bunch of people down there, talking to some coaches, talking to other media people that cover other teams, people that cover the draft. I got a lot of like, OT2's up in the air a little bit. And to me, I'd much rather go with a Fashanu that I know day one will be at least above average pass protector at a minimum. Obviously, you hope he's much better than that. But I'm just saying, even at a minimum day one, and maybe he's not great in the run game, but I feel like you can teach, hey, dude, we're going to put on 10, 15 pounds of muscle on you, and we're going to teach you pad level in the run game.
Yes.
I don't think Fuaga is going to all of a sudden get these amazing feet, right? So, like, it might be fine. I'm just saying, if those guys are on the board, we've seen a lot of people mock Fuaga over Fashanu. I would be pretty frustrated if that was the
critical.
case.
Yeah, that would be worth specting for me all over again.
Yep.
And I think that's not fair, because Fuaga has a way higher floor than Becton has. I mean, think of all the pre-draft stuff about Becton that people got angry about and how things kind of worked out.
How it's unfolded.
Yeah, so that wouldn't be fair to classify that, but yes, it feels like taking your guy rather than going with the consensus thing that makes logical sense.
Yeah, no, we'll finish with this one thing here, and I know you got a bunch going on, but obviously I don't want to hit some. We talked about the article, and Joe's talked about it with DA and Meeks on draft season. I will just say this in terms of talking to people down there and kind of the sense around what occurred. There's no agenda from Diana and Zach like against the Jets. I'm just gonna like put that out there, and people can get mad at me all they want. I can tell you there's not. The article probably could have included some other stuff, I think, that's been thrown around that would have probably done some more damage.
Like more alarming.
Yeah, more alarming stuff where I would have been, I think a lot of stuff we knew. I think that my biggest takeaway from the article, and it's a Jets problem overall, and I think it's something that anyone that listens to me ever knows I get frustrated with, this victim mentality that everyone's out to get us and we're covered unfairly, and everyone's hard on us, and we're the only team with quarterback injuries, we're the only team with offensive line injuries, bad luck, all that stuff. There's some validity to all these different things. A lot of teams had quarterbacks get hurt. They weren't saying 8 wins would be an effing miracle with the guy that we drafted 2 years ago with a premium pick and a draft that had 11 Pro Bowlers and all pros followed it. We're not the people that like offensive line guys get hurt. We didn't really try to make any moves to make the offensive line better. We signed Roger Saffold. That's my only concern of like the other stuff, the phones and all this stuff's weird and whatever. I'm not getting into that. That's a high school drama. My point is just like the excuse making. There's no more excuses. Aaron Rodgers gets hurt in training camp this year. You're still getting fired if everything goes wrong. So I guess that's my biggest takeaway from that article is just stop at the excuses. It sucks. It all happened. It's not what anyone thought. You got to learn to adapt and adjust, not only pregame, but in-game, as well. To something goes wrong, adjust.
Right. I think that's my takeaway too, is that when a building gets leaky like that and you hear stories like that, it doesn't mean it's the end of the world or the sky is falling or anything like that. But it does make you legitimately wonder, are the right people in charge here, because they've been tested with adversity and they never, ever pass the test. And the reality is, say Aaron Rodgers stays healthy the entire season, which would be amazing. If that happened, which there's a good chance it doesn't, the Jets are going to get hit with adversity anyway. Something's going to go wrong. You might play a few games without Quinnen Williams or Sauce Gardner or Garrett Wilson or Breece Hall, or your just game plans you're on a cold streak for a couple of games. The kicker goes in the tank and you lost 2 games because of that. This is football. Like the constant whining of this happened, so it's not our fault. Look around at everyone else. That's a really poor mentality, and it speaks volumes about your character. And it's to me, it's wildly disappointing because I still believe in him, but Robert Saleh, the hiring of him was, the inverse of that.
All gas, no brakes.
It was, the whole thing was like, this guy's got the right mentality and he's going to be no BS, but he's also going to keep everyone on the same page. And instead, I don't know what's going on, but it just feels like, yeah, there's a lot of, this is why this went wrong. It's not our fault. And when you're a leader in this world, you might hate the fact that something was not your fault. It could be bad luck. It could be someone else that works for you. It could be somebody that you work for. When you're a leader, you take it on the chin. It sucks. It is a tough pill to swallow. It is tough to bite your tongue, but it's the best way to keep people rallying around you. And the Jets need to, I think my takeaway from that article, Will, is that the Jets need to find that going into this offseason to kind of crush all of the nonsense.
Yeah. The one thing I would say that speaks louder than any of the words that would come out, not the birthday post. There's a reason they didn't post it, because they don't want the comment section. Not a single player.
Birthday watch.
Yeah, birthday watch. Not a single player came out, liked the article, liked the comment defending Saleh, any of that stuff. They were more than happy to comment on Rex Hogan parting ways. And I've never seen by the way, like literally I've never seen players on a roster when a team mutually parts ways, quote unquote, with an assistant GM actively supporting them from like star guys on the team. That was Breece and DJ Reed and stuff. That was interesting, but end of the day, the Jets are going to have to figure it out. I don't think Saleh's getting fired, but I would say it's a non-0% chance. Like, I don't think it's totally out of the question. I just don't. Let's be realistic here. If it was going to happen,
yeah, something doesn't smell right. But
there's a lot of red flags. I just haven't seen enough to say what he's going to fire him and hire Vrabel. Although probably be the right move.
That would be really wild and largely applauded, I think.
Yeah, I think anyone that gets mad about that, like
the approval rating would be quite high. I will say that.
You want to sell more you want to sell more tickets. That's the best way to go do it. Obviously, appreciate you hopping on. Obviously, you're going to have Stock Exchange episode. I know you guys are doing a 2-round mock, so make sure everyone's tuned into that. NBC article you had out yesterday with Senior Bowl stuff. Everyone already knows all your stuff. So appreciate everybody for listening. Main pod will be back. Other guys, draft season. I'm missing something else. Buck the trend today as well. But we'll talk to you guys later this week.